Hi, I'm Josh McDonald,
Hi, I'm Emily Kerr.
and we are Hand Therapy Academy. So we've got Emily joining us again today. She's going to give us another question as a staff member. So, Emily, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, in our last podcast, we talked a little bit about mistakes, and you talked about hiring more so for the front desk staff. But from a therapist perspective, what are the most important traits that you look for when you're hiring new therapists?
Yeah, so I put a lot of thought into this over my career. Like I've even before I owned a clinic, I managed a couple different like pediatric clinics, and I managed another hand therapy practice. And so I've been in the process, I've been in the world of hiring staff, hiring therapists for a while. And so I've kind of broken it down and have a little like metric system I use because everything I put a system to it, right? So I'm looking for three characteristics. I'm looking for someone who's a good therapist. I'm looking for someone who's a good staff member. And I'm looking for someone who's a good person. I want someone who's a good therapist. They're going to make their patients better. They get along with the patients well. They're very personable. They accomplish goals and they understand like how the rehab process works. Because I've worked with therapists who were great people and did the job they were supposed to, but their patients didn't get better or they didn't progress them like they were supposed to. So I want a skilled or willing therapist. It's going to be a skilled therapist. Sometimes that takes time. I want someone who's a good staff member, a good employee. That means, from a therapist perspective, getting your notes done on time, billing the way you're supposed to. We talk about efficient billing, and we talk about how we're going to get the right units in. So I want someone who's getting that done. Someone who works well with other people. Everyone that gets along in the office. Someone who is willing to go like a little extra mile, and they're willing to fill lotion bottles when they've got some downtime, or they clean the hydroculator, or whatever it is. They're willing to like put in some extra effort beyond just like, nope, I'm here to treat patients, and that's all I do. I want a good staff member, and then I want a good person. Like, I don't want to hire staff that are just like, yeah, you're able to fill the hole, you have a pulse, you can treat patients, check the box. Like, I want someone who's like, they care about people and they're going to have like this engagement with the other staff members and the patients. So yeah, I'm looking for a couple of different characteristics in there that says it's this, because I've worked with people who are two of the three, and the third not being there is super noticeable. I've worked with therapists who were great with patients, like they made good progress and they did their job well, but nobody liked them. And there was this awkward tension in the clinic, and that just makes for a bad environment all around. So you kind of have to keep that team concept working and functioning well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you feel like some of those traits can be taught, or like what's your trial period when you like on an interview? If you feel like a new therapist like appears to be a good hire, and then you hire them and it's not going well, how long do you let that process ride out?
In the state of Arizona, it's kind of restricted by the rules of an at-will employment state. Ultimately, you have the right to work here and I have the right to employ you. So in Arizona, if for some reason there's something going wrong, I have to go through a process that says, we sat down and I gave you an action plan and you didn't do it. And I gave you an action plan and two or three cycles of that. And then I can fire you anytime I want in Arizona, but I have to prove that there's just cause or I can be sued later. So my job on the front end is to make sure that I don't have to do that, right? So you asked if it could be taught. Yeah, I can absolutely teach someone to be a good therapist. Most therapists, right? Some people don't want to learn. Some people just can't quite get it. But most therapists can learn the skills. That's why they went to become a therapist. So that's the most teachable one of those. The work ethic that says of someone who's a good staff member, that's something I want to see in that first interview. I want to see like, well, talk to me about your job description in your last place that you worked, or tell me about some of the jobs before you became a therapist. If they were a waiter or waitress, chances are they're going to be willing to put in some extra work just to make things run smoothly. They're going to help everybody out, those kinds of things. And the good person is getting to know them, right? Like, it's my job on an interview to make sure I'm not going to hire someone who's going to conflict with the rest of the staff, or that someone that like, yeah, I just don't get the right vibe from the situation. Like they're just in it for just a paycheck. I want a therapist who's going to bond with other people around them and they're going to have that connection.
Yeah, I feel like we or you have been lucky so far, at least since I've been with you, that you've hired mostly past or previous students. Even though I know I wasn't a student with you, but I guess, how would you go about the hiring process if you weren't as lucky to get a student?
Yeah. That's tough. That's about having connections to people. I encourage when people ask us, like, how do I get into hand therapy? I really want to do it. It's start making connections, start meeting hand therapists, go into clinics, chat with people because 5 resumes sitting on my desk are not nearly as impactful as me knowing a person over here who might be looking for a job. Because if I know that person, I know who they are. I've had some interactions with them. I know what kind of person they are. I know their work ethic. I know how they talk to people. Do they curse every fifth word? Like silly things like that. But that resume, that piece of paper doesn't give me nearly as much of that. So if I'm looking to hire someone and I don't have a student or a previous student who's a potential, then I'm either reaching out to those students or other people to say, hey, do you know somebody? Because that's an indirect connection. Or I'm trying to pull from therapists that maybe I know to say, like, do you have a good student you used? Or are you looking for a job? That personal connection is way more valuable than just looking for resumes and hunting through page after page of resumes. My brain glosses over and those don't register anymore after about 3 of them.
Yeah, no one wants to spend that much time doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you hire so many previous students, do all of this, or does all of this apply to the screening process for the level 2 students that you do decide to take?
No, not so much. I have had one of the first therapist I hired to work with me didn't initially have interest in doing hand therapy. His level 2 fell apart, and a friend who was his professor called and said, like, hey, can you pick this student up and just help him so he graduates? I'm like, yes, absolutely, we can fit him in. Wasn't a big deal, and he ended up loving the feel of hand therapy. So I don't necessarily hold my students to that same expectation because you're still so new in your formation as a therapist and as an adult. Like, right, like you haven't actually worked a real full-time job yet, so you don't know that's like that work ethic can still be taught. And being a good therapist, you're not yet. No one expects you to be because you've only done this for 3 months in a setting somewhere where someone was holding your hand for 6 weeks. So I don't expect the same level from students, but I want to see that progression. If I have a student in the first 3 4 weeks and I think, oh, this student's doing great, maybe we have some potential here. If I'm, I can see a need in the future and I want to, maybe this person's a potential down the road hire. I want to see them progress in those 3 categories, and I want to know they're going to get along with everybody. They have a good heart, and they have a desire to work with people, but they're just not willing to do the extra stuff. And I ask them over and over again, and they're just not jumping in and getting someone else's patient a hot pack or putting someone else's stuff away. And they're just not getting that. That's kind of a non-starter for me as we get to know that person.
Yeah, as a student, I always felt like each one of my rotations was like a 3-month long interview process at each different place. So that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And I think students don't always realize that. We get a number of students who feel like it's another box to check before they graduate. And then when they graduate, then they'll go look for a job. Then they'll go, like, this is a working interview. And it's a small enough world in most communities that I know enough therapists and I know enough professors at universities that if someone says, oh, Josh's name is on their resume for their level 2 rotation, they're going to call me and I'm going to give an honest review, right? Like I'm not going to open myself up for defamation of character stuff. I have to be careful with that. But if I say, yep, they were a student with us and that's all I say, then they probably know that was that 3-month working interview did not reflect well on what that student can do. So students need to realize that is, if not an interview for that job, it could easily lead to connections for other jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that's a whole bunch of information, but yeah, if you guys have any questions about the whole small business side of things, hiring, all of that, someday we'll talk about firing people because that's super fun too. But maybe not this cycle. You can reach out to us, info@handtherapyacademy.com, or reach us on our social media platforms at Hand Therapy Academy.